And ladies and gentlemen, from one person who's broken the mould to a woman who I'm sure you agree has broken the mould, I want to do something and break the mould again by just changing up the format a little bit and in conversation with Kanya King. So let's just, before we talk about the Mogos, I just want to find out a little bit about your story. Tell me, from your family background, was entrepreneurialism, was that part of your background? Where did it spring from?
Well, my mother came from Galway in Ireland. My father came from Ghana. And to be honest, they must have shown an entrepreneurial flair to come from their home countries to this country and basically pursue their dream at a very young age. Having said that, anytime I wanted to do something in business, my mother gave me 101 reasons why I shouldn't do it. So I'm sure we're all familiar with that. I mean, she wanted me to be a teacher, and I left school at 16, so I failed in that aspect. So I stopped telling her anything, and because I'm the youngest girl of 9 children, I bought my first property at an early age. So that was my first business venture, because I wanted to get away from my sisters and brothers. And because it was a matter of survival, you know, when you grow up sharing a room with 5 other sisters and brothers, it's pretty awful. And being the youngest girl, getting all the hand-me-downs. And in those days, it wasn't vintage, you know, clothes. It wasn't very fashionable. It was all about jumble sales. So I kind of, you know, it was about, from a young age, whatever, I had to make my own money, save, and basically help my mum pay the bills.
I'm with you. And from there, and from that, you know, from your first property and so on, where and when did this idea of the MOBO Awards emerge from, and how did you go about it?
Well, I mean, the MOBO Awards is an event that I actually really wanted to attend and be part of. I never, ever wanted to organise it. But you know, I tried to convince many other organisations. I tried to convince MTV and the Brits and lots of other major ceremonies that they needed to have more diversity in the genres that they were promoting. But they said there wasn't an audience for it. So in the end, I thought, you know, put my money where my mouth is. If I really believe in this, then, you know, I need to go for it. And I thought, you know, the musical landscape was changing. Music of black origin in its various guises was providing a high percentage of the annual turnover for the music industry. But largely until the MOBO Awards, there was no vehicle where hip-hop or, you know, R&B could be showcased, or the artists who perform within those genres. So, you know, that was my, you know, I suppose my calling really. I made a decision that this is what I was going to do, and a lot of my friends were very successful musicians, so I started off organising gigs, and this led me into really putting on our first ever major event.
Fantastic. And it's amazing how it's grown and grown. 57 countries, I hear, is the latest count for the Music of Black Origin Awards, which is just incredible.
Yeah, we now, we go out to, it's over 250 million people, and, you know, we get millions and millions of emails from all over the world, and, you know, I've kind of, you know, I've seen lots of events come and go over the years, but I've, you know, each year I've tried to expand it into different territories, and that's where we are today. Which is fantastic.
And so tell me, along all those years, and it has been quite a few years now. How many years?
12 years.
12 years. So
12
in those
12... I was very youthful when I started.
You still are. So in those 12 years, I bet there must have been all sorts of ups and downs, highs and lows. What have been the challenges? What have been the good times?
I think nobody can be in business and not have challenges. And I think if we talk about, I suppose, highs, let's start with highs. You know, I've met many highs. I mean, of course, I started the first show, I remortgaged like you did. I don't advocate it, however, but I didn't tell my mum, and I remortgaged my first property. And I decided, you know, to put on, you know, the show within 6 weeks, because after campaigning for many, many years to get a TV slot, I went to see, you know, Carlton Television, and they said, we've got good news and bad news for you. The good news is we're going to give you a slot. The bad news is, you know, we've got no budget and it's going to be in 6 weeks' time. So I thought, you know, listen, if you get an opportunity in life, you've got to go for it. And so I wanted to obviously seize it, you know, seize this and run with it. So I, you know, obviously had to remortgage my place, get the money, and, you know, the first event was a huge success. So that was one of the big kind of achievements, because it was at a time when, you know, there was no MTV base, it's hard to believe, you know, no Channel U, Radio 1 Extra. And, you know, most kind of black programs were late night slots, if indeed they were on television. So there was, you know, there was a huge responsibility. And not only did I want to put on an event that commercially made sense, I wanted it to have high production values. I wanted it, you know, to compete with all the other major events out there, but of course, very limited budget. So that's, I suppose, you know, that's, I suppose, one of the highs. Also, other highs are Goldsmith University. I left school at 16, but then I decided, you know, my mother always said to me, education, education. So I went back, took A-levels, went to Goldsmith University. But of course, I got kicked out because... So, because I wasn't attending enough lectures, and so, you know, years later, when they offered me like a fellowship, I said, do you realise you kicked me out here? And they said, well, basically, you're in good company. We've done the same with Mary Quant. So, you know, I felt very fortunate there. And I think, yeah, that, you know, getting the MBE, I mean, I felt it was very much not about me, but also showing the kind of, you know, massive appeal of the music I love and lots of young people. So those were highs. Of course, there'd been many lows. And I think, you know, if I was to think of some examples, I mean, I remember getting our first big major sponsorship deal. I managed to, you know, convince the chairman of World Online at the time to sponsor 3 of our main events and managed, you know, sign £3 million deals. So I was very chuffed. So our first event went very well. You know, the second year, 2 weeks before, you know, the Dancer Award, in which this was one of the events they were sponsoring, we couldn't get hold of them. And, you know, our accountant was ringing, you know, the finance department and, you know, what's happening? No one was replying. And so I had to call up the chairman. I said, look, you know, obviously we've got an event on in 2 weeks' time. And they said, well, we've got bad news. We're not going to be paying you. And it's nothing you've done wrong. We've been bought by another company, and basically our strategy is we're no longer staying in music. So that was like a, wow, huge kind of, you know, learning curve for me in recognising that in business you have to have contingencies. You know, there needs to be other plans. And so I said, well, you know, when you're putting on events, you take on a lot of people, and of course you're committed to, you know, paying them. So by hook or by crook, I was going to put on this event, and so I managed to kind of negotiate a deal with them. Of course, I was saying to them, you know, we're going to take you to court, but recognising I didn't have the money to do that. So in the end, we negotiated a deal, and, you know, the company was called Tiscali, by the way. So that was one of the low points. There have been other low points, but I think, you know, in starting off, I didn't have, you know, many good advisors I could call upon. You know, I didn't know any good accountants or lawyers, and I think they're very important in business and starting out. But of course, you get those great networks in time, great contacts.
Okay, great. And so just to close, tell me, what's your vision with the Mobos now, because it's already been phenomenally successful. We've already talked about how many millions of people watch it and how broadly it's shown across the world. What's your vision with it now? What are you wanting to do in the coming years?
Well, I suppose we've spent the last 12 years really building a strong brand policy, and ultimately this is to facilitate kind of expansion into other business-related areas. I mean, we already fly artists all over the world. We do concerts all over Africa. We also have extended into kind of clothing range. It's very limited range in just T-shirts and caps. And this is just bought through our, you know, website, and we have phenomenal sales already. So I suppose our plan is to kind of implement other MOBO initiatives, and that is, you know, more live events around the world. We have, you know, our website, we get millions and millions of, you know, hits each month, and it's a great way of us getting feedback. And of course, we're going to expand into the whole digital arena so that we can have an interactive social networking site throughout the year. And we've got many ideas, but of course the key is to focus. You know, we have a 5-year plan, and of course there will always be other opportunities that arise when you are, you know, following through your plan that we, you know, will of course take into consideration. But of course we also want to be around for another 12 years.
Excellent. And we will be watching to see, ladies and gentlemen, Kenya King.
Thank you.
And keep your applause going for our whole panel.